I didn't wake up because of a sound. I woke up because of the absence of one. You ever have that feeling? When something is so quiet, so unnaturally still, that your brain starts ringing alarms before you even understand why. That was me that morning. My eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the dim light creeping in through the window. For a second, everything felt normal. Just another early morning. Another quiet day in a suburban neighborhood where nothing ever really happens. But then it hit me. The silence. No birds. No distant traffic. No early joggers passing by. Not even the usual dog down the street that barked at literally everything that moved. Just nothing. And that's when my chest tightened. Because silence like that? It doesn't happen here. I glanced at my phone, 6:17 a.m. Too early for noise, sure, but not this kind of emptiness. There was something off. Something very off. I sat up slowly, listening harder now, like maybe I had imagined it. Like maybe if I focused enough, the world would start making sense again. But it didn't. Instead, I noticed something else. The light that IT wasn't right. It looked blocked, darker than it should have been at that time of morning, like something outside was interfering with it. That's when the uneasiness turned into something sharper. Curiosity, mixed with a growing sense of dread. I swung my legs off the bed and walked toward the window, each step feeling heavier than it should. And I remember this part clearly, because everything changed in that exact moment. I pulled the curtain aside, and my brain just stopped. For a second, I couldn't process what I was seeing. It didn't make sense. It didn't fit into reality. It looked like something out of a disaster movie, a war zone, or a construction nightmare gone completely wrong. Because where my front yard used to be, there was nothing. Just a massive trench. Deep. Wide. Perfectly carved into the ground like someone had taken a giant blade and sliced the earth open around my entire house. My house sat in the center. Like an island. Completely isolated. Completely surrounded. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Helpless. What is that? I didn't even realize I said it out loud. My voice sounded distant, like it didn't belong to me. Because my brain was still trying to catch up. Still trying to make sense of something that absolutely made no sense. This wasn't a hole. This wasn't damage. This was deliberate. Planned. Executed. And somehow, it had happened overnight. I didn't think. I just moved. I threw on a hoodie, barely even pulling the zipper up properly, and rushed out of my room. Down the stairs. Straight to the front door. My heartbeat was loud now. Too loud. Like it was trying to warn me of something my mind hadn't fully grasped yet. I grabbed the handle, opened the door, and stepped out onto the porch. Then stopped immediately. Because the ground was gone. Completely gone. One more step, and I would have dropped straight down into that trench. I froze, instinct kicking in just in time. Slowly, carefully, I leaned forward and looked down. Fresh dirt. Dark. Moist. Recently dug. At least 6 feet deep, maybe more. And the edges? Too clean. Too precise. This wasn't random destruction. This was controlled. Professional. Which only made it worse. Because that meant someone had done this on purpose. Not just someone. A group. With equipment. With planning. With time. And yet, I hadn't heard a single thing, not one sound. That's when the fear really started to settle in. Because it wasn't just about the trench anymore. It was about how it happened. How does something like this happen overnight? Without anyone noticing? Without anyone stopping it? Without a single sound reaching me? I stepped back slowly, my mind racing now. Trying to piece it together. Trying to find logic in something that felt completely unreal. And then, a name surfaced. The HOA. Of course. It had to be them. For months, they had been pushing me. Pressuring me. Testing me. It started small. A letter about my fence being too tall. Then another about the color of my garage door. Then complaints about my backyard workshop. Each time, it escalated. More notices. More fines. More threats hidden behind polite, corporate language. And every single time, I pushed back. Legally. Calmly. But firmly. Because I knew something they didn't expect. I knew my rights. And I wasn't going to let them bully me into turning my home into some copy-paste version of every other house on the street. But this wasn't pressure. This wasn't a warning. This was something else entirely. Something extreme. Something personal. I pulled my phone out, almost on instinct, and started recording. Okay, it's early morning, I said, my voice unsteady. And there's a trench, a massive trench, dug around my entire house. I turned the camera, capturing the full view. There's no warning, no signs, nothing. This just appeared overnight. Even as I said the words, they sounded ridiculous, impossible. But the video didn't lie. This was real, and I needed proof. Because something told me. This was just the beginning. I didn't call anyone right away. Not the police. Not the HOA. Not even a neighbor. Because deep down, I already knew this wasn't random. And if it wasn't random, then someone thought they could get away with it. That thought alone made my chest tighten. But it also did something else. It slowed me down. Forced me to think. Because reacting emotionally right now, that's exactly what they'd expect. What I needed was proof. Real proof. Not just a trench sitting outside my house. But how it got there. Who did it? And why? And that's when it hit me. The cameras. 6 months ago, after one too many unannounced inspections, and a situation where someone from the HOA had walked into my backyard without permission, I made a decision. Not a loud one. Not something I told anyone about. But something that, at the time, felt like overkill. I installed cameras. Not the obvious kind either. No big blinking lights. No visible lenses. These were small. Hidden. Strategic. Every angle of my property was covered. Front yard. Driveway. Backyard. Side paths. Even parts of the street. At the time, it felt like I was being paranoid. Now, it felt like the smartest decision I'd ever made. I didn't waste another second. I turned around and walked straight back inside, locking the door behind me like that would somehow make this situation feel more controlled. It didn't, but it gave me something to do, something to focus on. I moved quickly through the house, straight into my office. My hands weren't steady anymore, but they were moving fast, muscle memory taking over as I powered on my computer. The screen lit up, too bright for how dark everything suddenly felt. Come on, I muttered under my breath. The security system loaded. Login. Dashboard. Camera grid. All feeds active. All quiet. But that wasn't what I needed. I needed last night. I pulled up the timeline. And for a moment, I hesitated. Because something in me already knew. Whatever I was about to see was going to change everything. Still, I clicked. The timeline jumped back. 8 p.m. Nothing unusual. The street looked normal. Calm. Quiet. A couple of cars passing. A neighbor walking their dog. 10:12 p.m. Still normal. Lights off in most houses. Street empty. 11:03 p.m. Dark. Silent. Exactly how it should be. I exhaled slowly. Maybe this was something else. Maybe. 11:47 p.m. Movement. A sudden flash of light across the screen. My eyes narrowed. I leaned closer. Headlights. Bright. Direct. Approaching. One vehicle. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, the camera view filled with light, sharp beams cutting through the darkness like something out of a movie scene. My heartbeat picked up. No way. More vehicles pulled in. Big ones. Not cars. Trucks. Heavy duty. The kind you don't just casually drive into a residential neighborhood at midnight. And then came the part that made my stomach drop. They didn't hesitate. Doors opened. People stepped out, fast, coordinated, like they had done this before. Reflective vests, hard hats, gloves. Everything about them looked official, organized, professional. But something felt wrong. I zoomed in. No logos. No company names. No markings on the trucks. Just blank surfaces. Like they didn't want to be identified. That's when the uneasiness turned into something darker. Because now, it wasn't just suspicious. It was intentional. I kept watching. The workers spread out quickly, taking positions around my property. Some set up floodlights. Others marked the ground. A few stood watch near the ends of the street. And that's when I noticed something that made my skin crawl. 2 vehicles moved into position at both ends of the block. Parked sideways. Blocking access. Completely. No cars in. No cars out. My throat went dry. They sealed the street. This wasn't construction. This wasn't maintenance. This was a controlled operation. Planned. Executed. Hidden. And then, the black SUV arrived. It didn't rush in like the others. It rolled in slowly. Deliberately. Like it didn't need to prove anything. Like it already owned the situation. I felt something twist in my gut. Because I already knew. Before the door even opened. I knew who it was. The driver's side door clicked open. A man stepped out. Calm. Composed. Confident. Mark Reynolds. The HOA president. I leaned back in my chair. My jaw tightening so hard it almost hurt. Of course it's you. He didn't look rushed. didn't look nervous. If anything, he looked satisfied. Like this was something he'd been waiting to do. He walked across the street, hands in his pockets, scanning the area like a man inspecting his property. Then he stopped near one of the workers. They spoke. I couldn't hear the audio, but I didn't need to. His body language said everything. Pointing, directing, commanding. At one point, he turned and pointed directly at my house, at my land, at the exact line where the trench would soon be. That was it. That was the moment. The moment everything stopped being a theory and became undeniable. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake. This was him. I scrubbed forward. 12:10 a.m. The machine started. And just like that, the ground began to disappear. Huge mechanical arms dug into the earth with terrifying precision. Dirt was lifted, moved, piled. Fast, relentless. Within minutes, the shape of the trench started forming. Perfect lines. Clean cuts. Measured spacing. They weren't guessing. They knew exactly what they were doing. And they were doing it fast. Too fast. Efficient. I switched between camera angles. Front yard. Side view. Backyard. Every angle told the same story. This was coordinated. Almost military-like. Workers didn't waste movement. No confusion. No delays. Just execution. 1:02 a.m. The trench was already halfway complete. My house was beginning to look exactly like it did now. Isolated. Cut off. Trapped. And through it all, Mark Reynolds kept walking. Observing. Supervising. Like this was just another project. Another task to complete. At one point, he stood still. Right in front of one of my cameras. Close enough that I could see his face clearly. And that's when something shifted. Because he smiled. Not a big smile. Not an obvious one. But enough. Enough to show satisfaction. Pride. Like he believed he had won. Like this was the final move in a game I didn't even realize we were playing. My hands curled into fists. Because that smile? That was the moment I stopped feeling confused. And started feeling angry. I fast-forwarded again. 2:26 a.m. Almost done. The trench now fully circled my house. Workers were finishing edges. Smoothing walls. Making it look clean. Intentional. Permanent. And then, just before they left, Mark walked the entire perimeter one last time. Slowly. Carefully. Taking it all in. And right before he got back into his SUV, he turned once more toward my house. Paused. And nodded. Like he was approving the final result. Then he got in. And they all left. Just like that. And no cleanup. No warning. No explanation. Gone. Leaving behind nothing but silence. And a trench that changed everything. I sat there, staring at the screen. The footage still paused on his face. That same calm expression. That same confidence. But now it looked different. Now it looked like a mistake. Because he didn't know. He didn't know that every second of that night, every move, every order, every face, was recorded, documented, saved. My breathing slowed. Not because I felt better, but because something else was taking over. Clarity, focus, control. Because now, this wasn't just my word against theirs. This wasn't just damage to my property. This was evidence. Clear, undeniable, dangerous. And for the first time since I woke up, I realized something important. They thought they had trapped me, but they didn't. They exposed themselves. And they had no idea. There's a moment, right after something unbelievable happens, where everything slows down. Not because the situation is under control, but because your mind finally catches up. That moment hit me as I sat there, staring at the screen. Paused on his face. Mark Reynolds. Confident. Calm. Certain he had gotten away with it. And for a few seconds, I just watched. No anger. No panic. Just clarity. Because the truth was simple now. They didn't just cross a line. They erased it. And in doing that, they made a mistake so big. There was no coming back from it. I leaned back in my chair and took a slow breath. Because now, this wasn't about reacting. This was about strategy. Because people like Mark, they don't expect consequences. They expect fear, compliance, silence. And I was about to give him none of that. The police arrived around 8:40 a.m. 2 cruisers. Lights off. No urgency in their step, at least not at first. But that changed the moment they saw it. The trench. One of the officers stopped dead in his tracks near the edge. You've got to be kidding me. I didn't say anything. I just watched their expressions change. Confusion, then disbelief. Then something closer to concern. Sir, the second officer said, turning toward me. You're telling me this was done overnight? Yes. With no warning? None. They exchanged a look. The kind that doesn't need words. All right, the first one said, stepping closer, carefully looking down into the trench. We're going to need more information here. You'll want to see this, I replied. Inside, the footage spoke for me. I didn't interrupt, didn't explain. I just let it play. Headlights, trucks, workers, the block streets. And then, Mark Reynolds. By the time the video ended, the room was completely silent. One of the officers exhaled slowly. Yeah, that's not HOA enforcement. The other shook his head. That's criminal. I nodded. Exactly. They stepped outside again, this time speaking into their radios, voices lower, more serious. This wasn't a routine call anymore. This had escalated. Fast. By 10:15 a.m., my lawyer arrived. Daniel Harper. Sharp suit. Sharp eyes. The kind of person who doesn't waste time asking questions he already knows the answer to. He walked in, glanced at the trench through the window, then turned to me. Show me everything. So I did. Every angle. Every second. Every frame. He didn't interrupt. Didn't react. Just watched. Carefully. Analytically. And when it was over, he leaned back slightly and smiled. Not out of amusement, but recognition. This, he said calmly, is catastrophic for them. I raised an eyebrow. That bad? He looked at me. No. Worse. He started counting on his fingers. Destruction of private property. Unlawful trespassing. Conspiracy. Intimidation. He paused. And depending on how this plays out, possibly unlawful confinement. I felt something shift inside me. Because hearing it like that made it real in a different way. They trapped me, I said quietly. He nodded once. They did. Then his expression hardened. And they documented it for us. I almost laughed at that. Because it was true. They didn't just do it. They performed it. And my cameras? Captured every second. So what happens now? I asked. He didn't hesitate. Now, we don't just respond. He leaned forward slightly. We make sure this becomes impossible to ignore. And that's exactly what we did. Within hours, the footage was secured. Backed up. Protected. By the end of the day, it was public. Not leaked randomly. Not posted recklessly. Released strategically. News outlets. Local first. Then bigger ones. And just like that, the story spread. Fast. Because it wasn't just unusual. It was unbelievable. A homeowner wakes up and finds his house surrounded by a trench, dug overnight, by his own HOA. Caught on camera. People couldn't look away. Clips of the footage started circulating online. The trucks arriving. The digging. Mark standing there, directing it all. That smile. That one moment. It went viral. And with it, so did the outrage. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. This hit something deeper. Something people understood immediately. Power being abused. Lines being crossed. And someone finally having proof. By the second day, everything changed. Reporters were outside. Cameras rolling. Neighbors whispering. And Mark? Mark disappeared. No statements. No responses. Nothing. Until day 3. Late afternoon. I saw him. Standing across the trench. Exactly where he had stood in the footage. But this time, he didn't look confident. He looked smaller. Less certain. Like the weight of everything had finally started pressing down on him. This has gotten out of hand, he called out. I stepped onto the porch slowly. Took my time. Because for the first time, I had control. You think? I replied. His jaw tightened slightly. We can resolve this privately. I almost smiled. Privately. Yes. There's no need to escalate this further. I let that sit for a second. Then shook my head. You dug a trench around my house. It was a, don't. I cut him off. He stopped. Because we both knew. There was no explanation that could fix this. I have everything on camera, I said calmly. I know, he replied. That was the moment. The moment his tone changed. From authority to negotiation. What do you want, he asked. No arrogance. No confidence. Just pressure. I didn't hesitate. Everything fixed. He nodded slightly. Done. Full compensation. Another pause. All right. Public apology. That one hit him harder. I could see it. But he still nodded. Fine. And your resignation. Silence. Real silence this time. Not the empty kind from the morning. The heavy kind. The kind that forces a decision. That's not necessary, he said finally. It is, I replied. He exhaled slowly. Looked away for a second. Then back at me. And in that moment, the power shifted completely. Because he knew. If this went further, He wouldn't just lose his position. He'd lose everything. Fine, he said quietly. One word. But it carried everything. A week later, the trench was gone. Completely filled. The ground restored. Better than it was before. New landscaping. New soil. Perfect. Like it had never happened. But we both knew. It had. The settlement came through. More than enough to cover damages. And then some. The public apology? Delivered. Carefully worded. But still. Out there. Permanent. And Mark Reynolds? He stepped down. No announcement. No speech. Just gone. Quietly removed. Like he had never been there. But the best part? The part that stayed with me? It wasn't the money. Or the repairs. Or even the apology. It was that moment. That single moment on the footage. Where he stood in front of my house. Smiling. Believing he had won. Because that's the thing about people like him. They think control is permanent. They think power protects them. They think no one is watching. But sometimes, the quietest decisions, like installing a few hidden cameras, turn into the loudest consequences. And by the time they realize it, it's already too late.